the thing that concerns me today, and I'm going to be very honest with you, is that Qatar is, because they're very sophisticated, is trying to wash its hands away from their responsibility on October 7th. And they're doing so very strategically. And because Steve Witkoff, who we know, it's public knowledge at this point, that he received that he basically made a deal with the Qataris to buy his hotel Park Lane in New York City um, before stepping into the administration officially. But we know that he has this sort of business relationship with the Qatari monarchy. And we know from last week that in his statement about the expansion of the Abraham Accords, that there will be some unlikely new countries joining the Abraham Accords. And I've heard also from other sources that Qatar may be joining the Abraham Accords as well. And now my fear when it comes to that is that they wash their hands off of October 7th, absolve themselves from all the responsibility that not only contributed to October 7th, but also to the destabilizing of many countries across the region. And that they would just be able to maintain the status quo and go forward without divesting from the Muslim Brotherhood's ideology, without rectifying their Muslim Brotherhood mouthpieces like Al Jazeera or AJ Plus. So as long as we don't do that, because we have to hold them accountable so that they can, at the very least, change the direction of how they want to exert influence in the world. As long as we don't do that, we're going to find ourselves in another conflict in 10 years.
So I was in Doha right before October 7th. I was actually invited to go into Gaza with the Qatari ambassador to Gaza in October 2023. But
Yeah.
when it was there, I was listening to think tanks, and I've had involvement with the embassy here in Washington, and they really are very sophisticated, as you say. But there was a definite amount of anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism that were there. And yet, when I was in Abu Dhabi or Riyadh or Dubai, um, and I was there before the Abraham Accords also, uh, there was a tolerance and the education was changing. It wasn't changing in other countries where there were cold peace. The education in Egypt, in Jordan, some of the most anti-Semitic places I've ever been. So explain when you lived in Dubai, what you saw as far as the education system. Did it go enough? Is it a model for what should go into the Palestinian Authority? Is it, should that be a model before normalization with Qatar? How do you use that as the model to expand? Because you just don't want to expand it in name as somebody can cover up October 7th. What are the things you saw that other countries should take on educationally?
I think the UAE has become not only a model for the Middle East and North Africa, but for the entire world. To be able to have that kind of diversity, where we have citizens and residents from all over the world coexisting together and contributing to the economy, the prosperity, the stability of the UAE and everyone in the UAE is really a testament to what they've done. And it's a testament to or an expression of human civilization. Because at the end of the day, the UAE is becoming kind of your new New York City. Because any environment that can allow for that kind of cultural and economic exchange in a space of safety and stability is inevitably going to give rise to a lot of rich, innovative, interesting, cutting edge ideas. And so obviously that will be a lot more competitive than other places where people don't even feel safe to step out into the street or don't feel safe to have an exchange, a dialogue with someone who's different than them. Now, Saudi is a different story, I would say. I think Saudi obviously has had to counter a lot of the IRGC's sort of nefarious role in the region um, and counter its ownership of Islam, basically. And they didn't do that in a positive way. Obviously, we had decades of Wahhabism, which Saudi was basically pushing the alternative, the Sunni alternative to the Shiite extremism that sprouted out of Iran after the revolution in 1979. But after decades of that ideology proving to fail and to radicalize not just people within Saudi, but really all over the world, and after 9/11 took place and the United States firmly looked at Saudi and their allies and said, you have to make a decision. If you are an ally, then you have to basically divest from this Wahhabism. And Saudi started taking decisions in that direction, set up an incredible center for the rehabilitation of former terrorists and the former Al-Qaeda members who were locked up in Guantanamo, who ended up going there through really interesting programming. And I was there. I visited in February 2023. I was able to speak to them and learn about this program and about other things that Saudi put in place to make sure that they step into creating a healthier society that would be more welcoming of obviously FDIs, foreign investments, and that would be welcoming for difference. Because ultimately, it's not about attracting money, it's about attracting talent, and for talent to feel safe to go into Saudi, a lot of reforms are necessary, and I think they're heading in an amazing direction. And it was just incredible to see all of the changes taking place in Saudi and just their eagerness to engage with not just the United States. So unlike what you saw in Qatar, where they're just using the US but preaching this anti-American rhetoric, but they're ready to engage with Israel and with Jewish people from all over the world.
So one of the things, so there was obviously it was night and day between being in the UAE and being in Qatar and Doha. When I was in Riyadh, I saw all the positive things you were saying. And then when October 7th came and I was spending more time with the Saudis, the embassy said to me, we didn't realize basically how, because the people, the street, if you will, that proverbial street, the Arab street, was really how anti-Israel, or if you will, anti-Semitic it was in the post-October 7th world, and we needed to take a step back. And it seems that the Emiratis were never really went that extreme, but the street of Saudi Arabia was a different kind of animal. Is that because of the years of Wahhabism? Is it because the education hasn't changed enough in Saudi Arabia? What do you think it is? Because it sort of sounds like there's a spectrum. Like the best is the Emiratis, and then the Saudis look like they're there, but not too close. And then there's Qataris that really need to be there, but America ignores them. So with the Saudis in specific, what do you think?
Yeah, and let's not forget about Bahrain. It's a small country, but it is a
I like
really,
Bahrain too.
yeah,
It's very
it is
nice.
a beautiful example of tolerance, of acceptance of different faiths. Bahrain always scores really well on the Religious Freedom Index, and they really pride and prize themselves for having this coexistence really as part of their day-to-day, as part of their culture, as part of their national legacy.
Even though
Uh,
it's 80% Shia at Bahrain, so it's an interesting phenomenon. It's
yeah.
like Azerbaijan in that way.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, and I guess one thing feeds into the other because it's half Shia, half Sunni. They have a Hindu population, a small Jewish population, lots of Christians who are expats. And so, you have all of their sacred spaces basically in one area in the sort of the old town in Manama. And because it is half Shia, they're also vulnerable to the influence of the Islamic Republic, and also positioned, geographically, in an area that would definitely suffer the wrath of the Islamic Republic. And they have been really trying to strategically offset some of those problems, and it's really difficult.
Let me bring you back to Saudi Arabia because I
Yeah,
do.
yeah, but Saudi. But this is interesting because Bahrain is what Saudi could be in terms of tolerance and coexistence. And where Saudis go to have more of an open, more freer environment because you can just drive the bridge and you're there. And so Saudi, I think the difference is that you have a much bigger population than the UAE. UAE's local population is tiny, and it's mostly expats. For our audience in terms of scale, Israel has 9 million people, and 1 million out of those 9 million are Moroccan. And so when you go to Israel, Moroccan culture is still everywhere. And the UAE is similar because you have 9 million people, of which 1 million are Emiratis. So you still have Emirati culture everywhere, but the majority are expats. And so it has, this really incredible, diverse environment. And Saudi is much more complicated because it's a lot bigger. You've had decades of Wahhabism, and it is seen in the eyes of the world and even domestically as the source of Islam. And so it kind of, sets the model, the example for what Muslim countries should behave like or should look like. And so they can't take so many risks too quickly because that can antagonize the fractions of the society that are still extremist and still not ready to kind of move forward or to rehabilitate or move away from fundamentalism, because then they're afraid of those fractions of society, causing terrorist attacks um, or rebelling against the ruling family. And you have to really understand, and I don't want to go into details because we would be here for an hour, but you have to understand how the Al Saud family came into power and how many conflicting and sort of competing families they had to get into sort of a conflict with and to rein in to be able to consolidate power. And so there's a lot of competition, a lot of conflicting interests, a huge population, and still a ton of radicalism, which is a legacy of Wahhabism, and a legacy of miseducation, really. Not enough educational reform. They've started appointing, women to the Shura Council, and they've started really like they've allowed women to drive in 2018, and they ended the segregation of genders in public spaces, and so these things are happening, but it does take a bit of time for the culture to really transform.
So